Peace be upon you, dear brothers and sisters. In a display of astonishing obstinacy, Donald Trump has once again revealed the extremes of his inconsistency. For a while, he appeared to be praising Muslims around the world, seemingly trying to win their hearts and cultivate goodwill among them. Yet this apparent friendliness, it turns out, may have been a calculated show all along. Some have claimed that Trump is secretly Christian, while others suggest he might be Jewish. However, none can say for certain what his actual faith is. What has become clear, though, is that he has crossed every boundary of duplicity, showing a disregard for humanity that is hard to fathom. Recently, footage emerged of Donald Trump visiting Los Angeles, where he surveyed an area that had been ravaged by fire. At first, the images suggested he felt genuine sorrow. From the helicopter, he observed the scorched houses and openly expressed sympathy, noting that this region was once beautiful, attracting visitors from near and far, yet now it lay in ruins. One house, however, remained surprisingly intact, prompting questions from Trump about what lucky owner's home might have escaped such destruction. It was only after landing that he learned this structure was not a house, but in fact a mosque. It stood tall amid the devastation, apparently unscathed by the flames. Trump had previously garnered attention for praising Muslims and seemed knowledgeable about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or so people thought. Some believed his friendly gestures indicated genuine admiration for Islam, but events in this ruined neighborhood showed a different side of him. When a local Muslim spotted Trump, the man eagerly approached to greet him with "Assalamu alaikum," hoping to shake his hand. The moment Trump heard that Arabic greeting, he abruptly pulled his hand away, refusing the gesture. At first, bystanders assumed it was merely an unfortunate oversight. Yet the images were recorded, revealing that Trump's behavior went beyond mere coincidence. In the area's remains, Trump grew emotional when faced with what had once been a grand church, reduced to rubble. He even appeared misty-eyed, lamenting that the church had been recently completed, but was now nothing more than charred remains. Then, as he peered across the distance, he saw an undamaged building. He inquired which place had been spared, and a Muslim man in the crowd smiled and announced that it was the House of Allah, a mosque that the fire had not consumed. The man attributed its survival to divine intervention, asserting that Allah can protect what he wills, while allowing other structures to perish. Upon hearing the man's explanation, Trump's expression shifted. The Muslim, having often heard Donald Trump speak well of Islam on camera, assumed that Trump would appreciate this miraculous preservation of the mosque, a reminder of a higher power. Yet behind Trump's forced smiles and public persona lurked a starkly different attitude. He approached the mosque, surveyed it quietly, and seemed uneasy. Observers, including security staff, escorted bystanders away to give Trump space. Then, in a shocking turn, Trump issued an order that nobody had expected. He demanded that a crane be brought in to demolish the mosque. To him, it was unsettling that a place of worship stood intact when all surrounding structures lay in ruins. He declared this wholly unfair and offensive to those who had lost their churches, claiming it was insensitive that the mosque alone still stood. The people who lived there were aghast. Many Muslims had gathered, alarmed by the idea that their beloved mosque, unharmed by the disaster, would be arbitrarily torn down. They pleaded with security forces, declaring that they would never allow the demolition of their sacred site. If repairs were needed, they said, they would gladly manage the renovation themselves. But toppling it with heavy machinery was a blatant desecration. Nearby security personnel mocked them, pointing out that if the Muslims genuinely believed Allah protected their mosque, they should stand aside and let God defend it, hinting that if divine power existed, then it would manifest without their intervention. The protesting Muslims were forcibly removed at gunpoint, pushed back from the site so the demolition effort could proceed. The crane's operator prepared to break down the mosque, but the moment it advanced, witnesses saw something inexplicable. Thick smoke began pouring from the machine. In seconds, the crane malfunctioned, prompting onlookers to rush back in alarm. The commotion escalated when the crane violently exploded, sending debris flying everywhere. A massive fragment from the destroyed crane hurtled onto Trump's helicopter, the very one he had planned to board. With a thunderous blast, the helicopter too was destroyed, sending everyone on the scene into a frenzy of panic. People ran for cover, and chaos erupted. The same crowd that had been forcibly cleared now watched in stunned disbelief at what unfolded. Some called it an unmistakable sign, an immediate rebuke of the plan to tear down the mosque. Among them, many believed that since Trump and his team had tried to challenge what Allah had seemingly spared, they faced a swift and severe reversal of fortune. Initially, Trump had been portrayed by certain media outlets as an ally to Muslims, praising their traditions and appearing supportive when cameras were rolling. Yet many suspected a show of expediency. Politicians in general, after all, often tailor their remarks for political gain. For this incident, there was no longer ambiguity about his stance. On hearing that a mosque remained untouched amidst ruin, he swiftly demanded its destruction under the pretext of fairness to other religious structures lost in the same disaster. Though Trump's earlier words about Islam were mild or even positive, his actions here demonstrated a willingness to shatter that facade in moments. This violent scene exposed, in the eyes of the local Muslims, the hypocrisy of a man who some said had tried to garner Muslim votes by feigning respect for their faith. Indeed, such contradictions cannot remain hidden indefinitely. People recounted how, in earlier statements, Trump had described Islam as having many admirable qualities. He implied that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a highly significant historical figure worthy of study, and some who had once believed him found themselves betrayed by what they saw on the ground that day. It is also worth remembering that Trump's personal religious background has long been a matter of speculation. Some claimed he was devoutly Christian, while others pointed out rumored ties to certain Jewish circles. Regardless, his detractors concluded that if he professed to follow any religion, his readiness to tear down a standing mosque revealed a callous side. For them, it was a testament that no matter his claimed identity, humanity and compassion did not figure prominently in his moral code. In their view, he had crossed lines of decency and respect for other faiths, lines that countless world leaders, even those with reservations about Islam, tend not to cross. Commentators noted that the fiasco, culminating in the crane explosion, was reminiscent of numerous events in history where those who attempted to desecrate a site seemingly set aside by divine will encountered spectacular mishaps. Whether one interprets such incidents as coincidence or sees a spiritual factor is subject to personal belief. The local Muslims, for their part, took it as a powerful sign that the one who spared the mosque was also capable of shielding it from planned demolition. They pointed out that the mosque had already survived a catastrophic disaster that ruined everything else. To them, the crane malfunction felt like an extension of that protection, leaving skeptics with much to ponder. There is a lingering question about what truly transpired after the dust settled. Reports claim that a frantic evacuation ensued, and Trump's team quickly tried to contain the story. Some rumored that he left the area in a state of silent shock, never fully explaining his abrupt move against the mosque. As for local residents, they continued to gather around the structure, offering prayers and recalling how this fiasco brought them global attention. They had already believed that the mosque's survival in a zone of utter devastation was a miracle, and this second equally dramatic event reinforced their conviction. Media outlets that covered the sequence initially focused on Trump's condemnation of the destruction. They had cast him as deeply moved by the sight of homes and churches leveled by fire. However, as footage of his altercation with the local Muslim and subsequent demand to raise the mosque surfaced, opinions shifted. Many criticized him sharply for displaying blatant intolerance at a moment when interfaith empathy was required. Indeed, a number of international correspondents wrote scathing editorials decrying the hypocrisy of calling for unity in some speeches while trying to demolish a lone surviving sanctuary in practice. This scenario poses questions about how political figures often manipulate religious rhetoric for short-term advantage. What sets them apart is how quickly they pivot under pressure, revealing what can be an underlying scorn for the very communities they once claimed to appreciate. The local Muslim population, previously hopeful, now saw Trump in a harsher light. The old man whose outstretched hand was refused realized that courtesy means little if overshadowed by suspicion. Others who observed Trump's tears for the burned church felt them overshadowed by his hostility toward the mosque. In the end, many concluded that claims of respect for Islam were hollow if undone by the slightest confrontation with an intact Muslim place of worship. Ultimately, what began as a straightforward inspection tour of a ruined neighborhood exposed deeper layers of duplicity. The explosion that consumed the demolition crane and apparently destroyed Trump's helicopter, became a symbol for how efforts to impose one's will can backfire unexpectedly. Those who look at the matter from a faith-based perspective see it as an instance of divine justice intervening. From a secular viewpoint, it might be labeled as a set of unfortunate mishaps. Whichever lens one adopts, the day's events were anything but ordinary. To believers, it underscored a recurring theme. A structure dedicated to Allah may survive calamities and attempts at defilement when He so wills. The notion that a single building remained upright in a sea of wreckage had already stirred whispers of awe. Then, confronted by the arrogance of ordering its demolition, a second event jolted everyone present into reconsidering their assumptions about power, fate, and divine grace. The sum effect was to remind onlookers that sometimes, even with the might of a head of state, certain lines ought not be crossed. In the aftermath, little more was heard from Trump on the matter, leading many to speculate that he chose to minimize the incident to protect his political image. Whether official statements eventually spun the tale as a freak accident or not, people in the area retained vivid memories of the day their mosque nearly fell and then remained standing after an unexplainable twist of circumstance. This, they believed, vindicated their conviction that a place dedicated to prayer could not be undone by mere mortal commands. For Muslims everywhere, the story reverberated as a lesson in faith, a testament to the conviction that if Allah wills, He can save what appears doomed. World leaders may posture, speak kindly, or claim solidarity, but their real nature is revealed in their choices, especially when they believe no one will oppose them. In that devastated region, the gap between speech and deed was laid bare. The battered mosque retained its dignity, while its would-be destroyer faced an immediate setback impossible to ignore.